This is Politinerds Radio with your hosts, Jazz Shaw and Doug Mataconis.
And welcome to Politinerds, episode number 2. I'm Jazz Shaw of HotAir.com.
And I'm Doug Mataconis of OutsideTheBeltway.com. And tonight our guest will be Congressman Richard Hanna of New York's 22nd District. And Jazz, you actually probably know a little more about Congressman Hanna than I do, since he's from your neck of the woods. So why don't you maybe give us a little background?
Yeah, the first thing to remember as we get to know Congressman Hanna is that unlike some of the other people we'll probably be talking to, he's not one of the incoming, freshman class. He was actually first elected in 2010 when he beat David R. Curry when the district was actually the 24th. It was renumbered after the census. He won virtually, I won't say unopposed. He did have a rerun against them, but won handily then. And this year he just came out of the election where he was unopposed in the general election after fending off a Tea Party challenge from the right. So, he's got some experience there. He already knows where the bathrooms are and things like that. He's a local guy, but he has a lot more civilian experience because before he came into office, he came strictly from the private sector.
I understand he owned a construction company before he ran for Congress.
Yeah, pretty big one. We'll ask him about that tonight when he comes on the show. I'm also kind of wondering what he's up to. We'll get to the end because the guy's had a long and storied life. He grew up in the same neck of the woods that I did. Actually, interestingly enough, the school where he attended high school at the same time as my older brother. I have to find out if we get time. I'm going to ask him about it. If he was on the wrestling team, he might have actually wrestled against my brother because we were in the same conference. That's how close together we were. So, but they're getting ready to wrap up for the lame dunk session and go home for the holidays and then welcome all the new freshmen. So I don't know. Are they voting on the continuing resolution, the Cromnibus tonight, or is that tomorrow?
I believe the vote in the House is tomorrow, and then in the Senate either late tomorrow or early on Friday. But yeah, the plan apparently is for everyone to vote by the end of the week and bug out of DC as fast as possible.
Yeah, and that's going to be pretty interesting. If they don't manage to do it, will they all turn around and go home? I don't want to drag him down in the weeds on stuff like this, but if they don't come up with a bill,
it sounds like they've come up with a bill. There are some complaints apparently from both the left and the right about various things in it, but it looks like it's going to pass, especially in the House. In the House, the majority controls enough of the agenda that I'm sure they wouldn't even bring this to the floor at this point if they didn't have the votes. So I'm sure it'll pass in the House and the Senate. I think the Senate will probably be a little more partisan, but it sounds like it'll get through there. I think at the worst, what you might see them do is extend the budget for a day or two into the weekend because the Senate needs to follow their 72-hour rule or something like that. That's about all you're going to see. I don't anticipate, from what I've read at least, any significant problems.
Yeah, and this is going to be one of those ones where if there are significant defections that Boehner runs into, it's going to be interesting to talk to Richard Hanna because he's one of those Northeast Republican politicians, the NERPs that I write about fairly often, who is not invited to all the Tea Party parties, if you will, because he's a very solid fiscal conservative, and the guy's lifetime NRA member, solid on guns and stuff. But there's other areas with the social conservatives where they just don't see eye to eye, and he's cut from that mold of the old Rockefeller Republicans up here in New York, and
Yeah.
they tend to, depending what side of the fence you're sitting on, they cause a lot of problems if you're one of the people who are constantly fighting against John Boehner and think that they're being too, I don't know, reasonable or something like that.
Well, yeah.
And
That's why. Yeah, I guess Congressman Hanna is probably not one of the votes that Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader McCarthy are too worried about this week. So.
no, I don't think so. In times past, he certainly has not been a rubber stamp. He's actually gone against the leadership on several items I can think of. But if you're bringing up anything to do with money, if you're bringing up anything to do with taxes, with just basically keeping the government open, he's certainly been a pretty reliable voice in that area. He'll clamp down and kind of chomp at the bit when you get off into some of the SoCon issues, but he's been very solid on taxes, on tax cuts, and just a whole bunch of issues. So no, I don't think Boehner has a problem with him, and I think he's been a good enough ally that he has been given some good committee appointments fairly early in his tenure there. So you never read any headlines about him because I think he's one of those boring people. I'm not trying to pump him up because he's from my part of the country or anything, but he goes there, he does his work, he gets his job done. He's not one of those guys that rushes out, like the most dangerous place to be in Washington is between like Peter King and a camera, for example. But
Right.
Hanna's not one of those guys. He goes on TV locally back home. He sends out constant Twitter updates and emails to his constituents, but he's just never really been one of those showboat guys. So you don't hear his name that often.
No, you don't. Although, I mean, it did come up, as I recall, because wasn't he, or maybe I'm mistaken, but wasn't his election at least partly related to some of the controversies that were going on in the neighboring district several years ago when the other New York 2022?
Well, wait a minute. Which one? You mean the one up in the far north where they lost?
Maybe the whole D Scozzafava thing is what I.
No, that's the one just north of him. That's the actual North Country that runs up near the Canadian border. He did some campaigning up there, did some stumping, but really he pretty much stayed out of that mess. And their areas are separate. They do border. When you get up to Utica, New York, and Syracuse, or actually just short of Syracuse, that's like the north edge of his district. When you go above there, you get up in near Watertown, and that's where the North Country was, and that's where Dede was running. So yeah, they work together at times, but I shouldn't say he and Dede did, but he and the state committee worked together at times up there. But he wasn't all that involved in that. He was more involved in the race that I was involved in, trying to unseat the old New York 22 district guy when I was working on a separate campaign, and we bordered with him in 2010, and he did some events with us, and just for full disclosure, really nice guy. I've never had a problem with him.
And how did his district change when New York lost two districts? Just out of curiosity.
The former cut of his district went from being an east-west egg shape, which pulled in a few too many Democrats out towards Syracuse, and switched and became a north-south district. Anybody that wants to pull a map out, running from Utica right down to by where I live, down near Binghamton, which was actually the most conservative part of the old 22. So his job actually got a lot easier, and that resulted in, like I said, this last time, there was only a primary. He was essentially unopposed. You're not going to lose. It's right now, I think Cook rated it as R plus 11. So it went from when our Curry had it, it was basically an R plus 1 that our Curry had picked up during the Obama wave because it swung over that way. And then it kind of swung back a little bit, when the wave came in 2010. But when they recut the district, now it's mostly farm country between those two cities.
So, yeah, and R plus 11 is about as safe as you can get in Northeast these days.
Pretty much. Both the cities are not strongly Democratic, and the area in between, like I said, is a lot of farm country. But we can let him talk a little bit more about that. Let's stop for a quick break, and we'll be back in a moment with our interview with Congressman Richard Hanna.
A progressive woman once told me that if she was my wife, she'd poison my coffee. I told her if I was her husband, I'd drink it. This is Alan Bordius, host of Their Finest Hour, Monday nights here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
Hi, this is Jason Dibbler, co-host of Q with a View, heard every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on FTR Radio. Right now, FTR needs your help in making the jump into the 21st century through some long-needed equipment upgrades. This is where you, the great and loyal listeners of Great Conservative Talk Radio, can really lend a hand. Visit GoFundMe.com/helpupgradeFTR right now. Your assistance, no matter how small, will help to ensure that FTR can continue to offer some of the best conservative radio on the interwebs. Your donation of $50 gets you up to 60 seconds of airtime on FTR radio 4 times. For $100, your ad will run 10 times, or if you don't want to run an ad, you can have 30 minutes of FTR airtime to talk about anything you want. There are other thank yous for other levels of giving as well, but those are some pretty great offers. We hope you'll consider making a small donation to help keep quality conservative talk radio alive and thriving on the internet. Visit GoFundMe.com/helpupgradeFTR today. Thank you.
Hi, this is Matt Lewis from the Daily Caller, and you are listening to Vigilant Liberty Radio.
And we're back on Politinerds with Congressman Richard Hanna. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hey, no problem. Happy to do it.
All right. We'll jump right into this. As you know, our show tries to get a little bit into the background of people, how they arrived where they are today, their road to their position in conservatism, call to service, things like that. You were born in Utica and grew up in Marcy.
Right.
Coincidentally, a little full disclosure for the listeners, that was about 15 miles from where I grew up. That was during a more prosperous time for Utica when General Electric was in their heyday,
when Griffiths was there and General Electric was there and Bonet Fibers, and pick a big company that hasn't left New York, that was there.
Exactly.
I'm going
to start out by asking you, back in that period, when you were still, growing up, going to school, what was family like? Life?
Well,
like
I never saw my dad. He worked every day. He was a carpenter and builder, business owner, and he got up 4:30 in the morning, and he'd come back at dark, and that's what I remember. And as I got older, I remember going to work with him. He'd kick me out of bed at earlier than sunup, and off I went. And as long as I could carry a block or drive a nail, I was welcome. I think that's where I learned to work.
I'm going to introduce you to Doug now, by the way, my partner. This is Doug Mataconis.
Huh. Hey, Doug.
Yes. Hello, Congressman. Your biography also mentions that your grandparents had a farm out in the country. Where was that?
I was my grandmother, and they still have the farm today, although it's not dairy anymore. Like most people, small dairy farms there's a long period of time when it just wasn't profitable. But we still had the land, and I spent just about every summer at some point on my grandmother's farm. And again, it was 4:30 in the morning. She made her own bread, made her own butter. We drank milk right from the cow, and I think those are the greatest days of my memory.
That was
she used to say to me, she used to say, "Time to get up, Richard. We got to go jerk the Guernseys."
Yeah, my grandfather had a truck farm, and we did a lot of similar things. By the time you get to high school, I'm just curious if you can recall for us, what did you